Welcome again to another episode of Small Town Black Man Let's Talk. We have new panelists tonight that we are very eager to hear from, and we appreciate you tuning in. To begin, I want to share the phone number if you have questions for any of our panelists, and that's 825-3245. Call in, and if you have specific questions for the subject or for one of our panelists. I want to thank everybody for tuning in over the past 4 episodes, and this will be our final episode. And it's been really a privilege to sit and monitor amongst friends, and I can't express enough my gratitude for each individual who's sat here and shared with our community their own experience and thoughts. It's really been an act of grace, and I am very grateful. Tonight, our subject matter is law enforcement and the justice system, and this was put to the end of the lineup for a lot of reasons. Obviously, this kind of was spurred on by what happened in Minneapolis with Mr. Floyd, and in an attempt to educate our community about some of the emotions and energy behind our brothers and sisters in the communities of color. So that's always been the attempt, is to educate and maybe enlighten those who maybe are confused or don't understand where some of the emotion's coming from. I'd like to read, as I normally do, a quote from Benjamin Watson's books, Under Our Skin. And he says, "Only when we spend time together and make it personal will we lay aside the prejudice of our minds and experience the true understanding of our hearts." I really, that resonated with me, making it personal. So I hope that you make it personal, because it's important, because it really does pertain to all of us, because we're all the human race together. I'd like to introduce, or have our panelists introduce themselves, and I believe that Dennis has been voted to go first.
Yeah, I don't know how I got voted, but that's all right. I'm Dennis Perkins, born and raised here in Connersville, Indiana. I spent 20 years with the Connersville Police Department and retired as a chief.
Your turn.
Okay. I'm Judge Paul Freed. I'm your current sitting Fayette County Superior Court judge, just finishing up at the end of this year my first term. And I am, I think, the one with the shortest tenure of anybody here in Connersville. I'm at 17 and a half years I've been here now in the city of Connersville, having been raised originally in Davies County, Indiana, but it's been a welcoming place to me. I'm glad to participate.
I'm Eric Nicholson, originally born in Cincinnati, Ohio, but raised right here in Cartersville for the majority of my life.
Wyndal Sleet. I'm currently living in Newcastle, Indiana. I'm basically born and raised in Connersville, Indiana. It's glad to be back to share my input any way I can with you guys. I spent about 20 years running from the law, so I'm just ready to put that aside and help out today.
You could go ahead and share some more if you want. You can start, Wyndal.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, my first insight I've ever experienced in Connersville about racism was very slight, because ever since grade school, most of my friends was white. So I didn't really see much color then. I know that it was there because being on the hilltop, we've had some endeavors of people coming there and calling names and with flags and things of that nature. But far as all out the racism from our community, I haven't really experienced that. I have seen opportunities that we didn't get and has been gave to the next because of color. I don't really say that's a town's fault, but I think it just following the way that it's always been. As far as the things I've experienced from the police, they've always treated me fair. They bust me, I signed the plea, I did it, I go away, come back, do my time, I'm done. They really never labeled me from being black on things like that. Actually, they pull me to the side and tell me I'm better than that, stop doing that, it's old. Basically I felt kind of that way more towards them, but I'm not knocking because I have seen it in other aspects for my black people. But as far as me personally, I can't, and I just want things to be better. I want the crime to go away, but if so, everybody should be treated different, whether they're black or white or whatever. A criminal is a criminal. When we all dial 911, we expect help. We don't expect to be judged because our house is dirty or we're black or we live in a certain part of town, so you go slower. We expect to hit 911 and get reaction just like if we was living out past the golf course. Just like in your neighborhood is in our neighborhood. We don't want people there that are breaking out windows, and we don't want them there just because they happen to be black. We don't want them there too. Black people there used to call the police on us. Me and Woodard throw rocks through the window, they call police on us. So it wasn't a black thing, it wasn't a white thing. And I think once that starts to be key, the black and white thing will go away. More opportunity should be offered to the blacks because they can add something that most white people's never experienced. I can't be mad at you for something you never talked about. You just always heard, you're a white girl, you're not going to date a black guy. Don't bring a black guy in here. If I do, I'm going to kill him. Don't bring him over here, so don't like him. So that way, when she goes to school, she don't even look our way. She don't even give us a look or nothing. Now, the ones who did, they was just going to see things their way. But that's really what I see in Connersville. They just thought we was going to rub off on them some way, so they didn't want us in their neighborhood. It seems to get better around here. I think that if, true people who really want change could just ask black people instead of telling them and trying to have a solution. You don't have a solution because we don't have a solution yet. But the best way to help a black person is get behind them when they're feeling some way about racism. Don't try to be the answer because you don't have it. Just get behind them and say, I support you. Whatever you want to do, I support you.
Yeah. Very good.
Before I address anything, I want to personally thank you for having the courage to step up and address these situations, especially at this current time. So it's hats off to you, Emma, because a lot of people are afraid to talk about this and do this, especially now today and with social media. It's so easy to hide behind your phone. There's so much hidden racism on social media, especially coming from people that I thought were friends, or and I'm not here to change the world, but it's kind of like Tupac said, I want to spark the heart for one person. If I can't change the world, I can change an individual who can change the world. So but I mean to address the panel as far as racism in the justice system, with a positive and a negative, anything that as far as negative that I've done, I brought on myself. It had nothing to do with white or black. It was my personal behavior, demons that I were fighting and that I brought upon myself. So there's really no negativity about it, as far as a positive within Fayette County or Connersville. I don't know the history of the Connersville Police Department or sheriff, but the most positive thing that I know that has happened in this town and in this county was the hiring of a former best friend, Dennis Perkins, the best cop to ever step foot in this town, hands down. You couldn't have hired a better person to do his job, and that's what he did, And
that helped us believe in Connersville.
To grow up with somebody in this town, to arrest your friends, to, this is a job he had to do, and he did his job, and it was never held against him. So, hats off to you, Dennis. That's my positive as far as you know, as with the justice system, you know. And as far as being incarcerated, it's, you know, it's called the Department of Corrections. And that's a lie.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to tell you that's a lie. It should be called the Department of Detainment.
Yeah.
Because I was arrested for dealing drugs. I was caught. I did my time. And not one part of the time I served was being corrected. I was just detained, did my time, and I was released back to the streets. You know, and it's you know, and once you are arrested, once you're put in the system, it's easy to go back.
Yeah.
It's easy to go back. You know, and they say it's up to you, but it's not up to you. It's not up to you. Once you are in that system, you're in a system. You know, and that system, whether you've done something or not, it's their choice to whether to send you back because they didn't like what you did or what you didn't do. So, I mean, you know, as far as racism, I mean, in this town with the justice system, I never really experienced it, you know, but, you know, it's the one thing that I've noticed the difference is, you know, at the times that I was getting in trouble, it was during the crack epidemic.
Oh.
You know, and during the crack epidemic, all you seen was in the media or in the papers right here in this old town or wherever. It was lock them up, lock them up, lock them up, lock them up. Put them in jail. Whether you were doing it or selling it, it was put them in jail was the best answer. And now, with the opioid epidemic, is they need help. You know why? Now these people need help. But when it was crack, we didn't need help. We needed more prisons. We needed more room. You know, prisons were overcrowded. You know, because it was easier just to lock them up. You know, but with opioid, it's like, oh well, you know, it's just they need help. But I don't understand. That's where and opioid, it's mainly geared toward, you know, your suburban white kids or a lot of, you know, towards white people. You know, it got out of hand. You know, I mean, it was nothing for your doctor to give you pain pills. Then when he was in trouble, he cut you off, and then it led to heroin and so forth. You know, I'm not a professional or a doctor on this, but you know, once it got out of hand, it was these people need help is what I didn't understand is, you know, why these people need help, but crackheads or you know, didn't need help.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, and another thing is, you know, as far as racism and that's it, with crack, it had a percentage of cocaine in it, and you can do 25 years. But a white man in a suit can have a kilo of cocaine or a gram of cocaine and do probation. He's got cocaine, you got a percentage of cocaine, but you're looking at 25 years. You know, you know those are the difference in, you know, the justice system, the things that I seen, that I experienced, you know, as far as racism, you know, as in with the justice system and being incarcerated, you know, but I mean, you know, in being incarcerated, it's built on racism. It's built on racism. I was incarcerated in Wabash Valley. It was probably 98% black.
Wow.
A few Hispanics and some white folks.
Wow.
And where Wabash Valley is located, it's in Carlisle, Indiana, a predominantly white area of Indiana, southern Indiana. So all your guards are white. And they don't go home and see other black people. Only black people they see or what they see is incarcerated. And you were treated like a black, you know, you got this racist white guard, and he was racist, and that's how you were treated, and it was either you were spoken to disrespectfully, and there's not a lot you can do about it, but it's just, I mean, as far as racism, it probably never go away. It never go away, but there's things that we can do to make it better. You know what I'm saying? Because, Wyndal says he's never experienced racism. Little Dennis Perkins, sorry. He can agree with me. As far as growing up here in Cartersville with racism, there was a little bit with it in the high school. We dealt with it. Most of the times that we dealt with racism in school, our peers knew the responsibility. They knew what was going to happen. But growing up,
I experienced it. I just did, because y'all handled it.
Yeah.
If you said nigger, you got beat up, and that was it. I know a lot of people today that are even with black people. I know they said it because they called y'all that and wrote it on your cars, and they have prominent jobs in this town, and they're friends with black people. But they said it in high school, and they painted it on people's cars, and they went away. They got beat up, and it was over.
But
that's why I didn't face it.
But as far as racism in this town, we were 12, 13 years old. We were fighting grown men.
Oh, wow.
It came from the adults. It came from, if a kid did say it our age or younger, they got it from their parents. It was nothing for us we generally grew up on West 5th Street and Summit, and we hardly ever left that neighborhood. And if we did leave that neighborhood together, we left together in a group because we knew what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. We knew. You would rarely see one of us individually. If you seen one of us, if we were by ourselves, we ducked through alleys. If we were walking home from wherever, we ducked through alleys. We ducked because we didn't want trouble. Mm-hmm. Because it wasn't that we were scared. We didn't want trouble. We didn't want trouble. And like I said, we go to the fair and have to fight grown men at teenagers, and it was from adults. It was rarely from our peers.
How was that handled at that time? Like, was law enforcement involved or no?
Personally, I've never seen anyone go to jail or be arrested for any engagements that we had, like at the fair or fights or whatever. It was most of the time we were told to leave.
Okay.
We were told to leave. Yeah. It was easier for us to leave the fair than for the people who caused the trouble to leave the fair. It's easier. It was that was the thing. You know what I'm saying? We long as we stayed basically in our place, which was on top of the hill. You know what I'm saying? On top of the hill. And
cops didn't come up there.
And on top of the hill, exactly. That's why I was curious. We policed ourselves on top of the hill. If we did something wrong and my mom wasn't around, his mom bust my butt.
Who policed Dennis?
Oh, his dad? Big Denny?
Yeah, he policed over
Little
here.
Denny for a reason. But, I mean, we policed ourselves. I was younger. I was told by a cop that crime, I think Hilltop was, I believe, is it the 5th Ward district?
Really?
Yeah, they had less calls anywhere on that area because we didn't.
Yeah.
You didn't call the cops. You don't call the cops on your children.
Yeah.
You dealt with it. You know. You didn't even have to have a phone when I was growing up. And my mom knew what I did before I even got home.
Two cops.
You know. But I mean, like as far as racism, it was more we dealt more with adults. We minded our business, we stayed in our area, and people knew that they could come up on the hill and their cars drive by, holler racial slurs out the window, and take off. You know, and we'd have a bucket of apples sitting there waiting. We had a bucket of apples sitting there waiting. You know, but I mean, yeah, as far as racism, it's here. It's in this town. You know, there was, my sister had said something to me that a councilman here in town said to the Richmond Palladium, I believe it was in the Richmond Palladium, that there's no racism in Cartersville. And only a white person can say that.
Right.
I'm sorry.
You're right about that.
I'm sorry. Or somebody who is very misinformed.
And they should not.
I don't experience it now because I'm not out and about. I work in
Right.
Shelbyville,
Yeah,
and I'm not around. But my kids do. You know, and like now, it's not outright like we had to grow up with, because now you can do it on Facebook. You can do it on Facebook, Instagram, whatever kids do. You know, it's you can hide behind a curtain and do it now. You know, but it needs to be it needs to be a change. There will be, maybe not in my lifetime, but you know, as you can see right now, people are fed up. You know.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Good job.
Well, obviously, being the judge here and about as white as you can get, unless I was made out of cornbread, I couldn't be any whiter. So I am certainly not going to attempt to address the question that's on the floor about have I experienced racism. Obviously, personally, I have not experienced any racism against myself. That would go without saying. You know, professionally though, having many years in the prosecutor's office and now almost a full term on the bench, having worked closely with 3 sheriffs and 2 prosecutors and prior judges and the other current sitting judge presently, in that cadre of people inside the system. That's a small group when you're just talking about sheriffs, prosecutors, and judges. That's a small group of people. They'd all fit at this table. But among those people who, you know, make and enforce the laws, I never saw personally out of that group that since I've been here. Now I'm not speaking about ages ago because I don't know those. But out of those group of people since I've been, I never saw a single racist act out of any of them. I really didn't.
That's true.
Now, one thing I'll say, I guess maybe I am uniquely qualified, being white on this panel, and it annoys me to no end, and I have wondered if it annoys Black Americans. Lately, I have turned on the television when there is a protest going on, and it seems as if they're always putting the microphone in the face of some 23, 24-year-old upper middle class white girl.
Can't even speak on it.
And she's just all enraged trying to speak for Black America.
Yes.
I don't understand this. Is that irritating to y'all?
Well,
when
what
you
it
see
is,
that?
it should show people that mainstream is taking all this over. And if anything, because I believe in the Lord with every fiber of my being. He's going to change all this. And if you don't succumb to him, you're not going to be nowhere anyway. So everything you do down here is nothing for me because I don't live down here. I just have to be here. You feel? So I don't look at it as, I look at it as people are misinformed about Black people. We're here. We're not going anywhere. We've always been here. I think, I don't want to go too biblical, but we might have been the first one here. You know what I mean? Because the pygmy of the skin changed as you move. But anyways, what I'm saying is that it's people that are in their home that's had one bad experience with a Black person. And they tell their great-grandson, who was only like 6, you see that Black guy right there? He ain't nothing. He ain't. And this little young kid idolizes his papaw. And when he sees that Black person he's scared. He's shook. His lips are not like the boys. His hair is not like the boys. You know what I mean? So if the old elder is speaking this into this child, that's what's going to, and that's the only reason racism has continued.
Right.
It has to start in this box you call it home. And if people are in the home teaching their children how to love, how can you say you love them? How you think they're going to get to heaven? By saying you don't love, I love Emma, just like she's a sister. because she is a sister. You know what I mean? So how can I teach my family not to love her like that? They're not going up there.
Right.
So that's the way I look at it. It has to start there first.
Well, I just,
But
going back on Mr. Dixon, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
but yeah, just to speak on what you're saying, it is.
It is.
It does anger you to see, a part of you wants to say, yeah, okay, white people are speaking out, but and a lot of what you're saying, a 23-year-old white girl speaking out is she's saying what we've been saying for years. For years, and then, and why are they interviewing her? Why aren't you interviewing somebody who is, and like with Facebook and stuff, a lot of white people are informed now on things that they weren't. It's everybody has a camera now. Everything, things that were in the dark are being brought to light.
Well,
To your point, that is the exact premise of why the people who have sat on this panel have been chosen. Because
But like
I'm
that
not
young
gonna
white
sit
girl,
here and
she
tell.
is okay. She's all right though.
Yeah.
She's speaking on something
Yeah,
that
yeah.
she's
Oh,
feeling.
yeah.
You can't deny that. That's what
Sure.
I'm saying. It's when
That's
it's
positive.
when you try to hush her. You know what I mean? Because she's confused. She's wondering why she truly likes black people. You know what I mean? She's wondering this, like, why are you guys out here doing this to these people? I like them. She's only 23 years old. Right, she can't speak on what years ago.
Right.
But she's trying to find her ground and support it. I say the best way to support it is just be quiet and get behind, because anything you say, somebody's going to say you're being racist about it, or somebody's going to take you out of conscience of it.
As
Sorry,
a
Emma.
white
No, you're
person,
okay.
when I see that on television, I'm a little bit embarrassed of white people. I get that you're going to show up to support the good cause.
Yes.
Right.
But I think you stand in row 2.
Okay.
Okay, and the articulate black person that's in the background while you're talking needs to move up to row 1, and they need to do the talking. And you need to be behind
The
them.
media doesn't like to speak to that articulate black person either, right?
Yeah.
They always get the dude that just looks crazy, is going to say the dumbest stuff that you're ever going to hear, and he doesn't speak. I don't want to get into politics, but it was like the 2 black women that Trump had on stage at his rally in Tulsa. They do not speak for black people. I'm sorry.
I didn't see it. I don't even watch TV that much.
I didn't either, but okay.
It was like WWF.
Oh.
It was horrible.
But to me, to sit at home also on your end, Judge, and be white and not speak out is just as wrong.
So I don't have anything wrong
You know
with
what I
being
mean?
there.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
step
not
back.
saying what you're saying, you know what I mean? But just to, like I said, anything you say, and especially CNN, because they need ratings. They need people to tune in.
Yeah.
So if you don't say nothing crazy and off the wall, nobody's going to tune in. If you're making sense, nobody wants to hear that. He's making too much sense. But, they have to get the cameras to the people who's really going to talk to their parents. It's at the reunions that you go to when they're full of white people. You stand up and say, I was with the coolest 3 black people ever, man. They really, and get people insight of, what's going on.
Well, Dennis.
I don't know too much, especially after he called me Little Denny, but that's okay. But no, just to echo what they both have said, growing up on the Hill, he is exactly right. We never did call the police. We had several instances. I remember one time my father come out there, handled it. They left and never came back on the Hill. Then there were certain ways that we would have to walk to Village Pantry. We decided to go down, and I don't know if you remember this, we decided to go down the hill once, and a gentleman came out, shot rock salt at us when we was coming down the hill because he didn't want blacks in his yard as we were cutting through. And he didn't even own the property. It was a hill that we used to walk down towards Village Pantry. So at the time with me growing up, and it's just kind of ironic because back then, I will be honest, I didn't like the police. We used to run from them. They'd say the police are coming, we'd run. We would take off and run, and then look, years down the road, I spent 20 years on the police department. And I do appreciate, what you said. That means a lot to me. It really does. But as far as growing up, yes, we dealt with quite a bit. And just like Eric had said, in school we would deal with it, but then we would handle it. And then, by the way we handled it was using our hands as those handles, and we would handle it. And then when I became a police officer, it was a whole different dynamic. I'll be honest, I was a little apprehensive at first because I wasn't for sure how I would be looked at. Because of being one of the first blacks on the police department. Hiring on in '97, it was kind of weird being able to say I was one of the first. And I'm thinking, well, who was the first? And it was my wife's uncle, Sonny Roberts.
Yeah, Sonny.
He was on. And when I hired on, he talked to me and said, hey, make sure you watch out for this, this, and this, and pay attention to them and different things. But then as I moved up the ranks and became an instructor, and I want to clarify some things that I have heard before about some of the police training. What I seen on that video, we wasn't trained to do that. That wasn't, here in Indiana, we were never trained to put our knee on anybody's neck. If we had them down and had that suspect, no matter who it was, black, white, whatever, we would handcuff them and then we rolled them over to get them up on their knees because you can't breathe with your arms behind your back. So, and I was looking at that and I'm like, why in the world aren't they rolling him over, getting him up? So I had a big issue with that. And when we come in before, and I was talking to, and Wyndal hit it right on the nose, we can't categorize everybody in that same group because they're not all the same.
Yeah.
We're definitely not all the same, no matter what goes on, and that is so true. And it was so awesome to hear you guys say that exact same thing so they could hear it from someone other than law enforcement. So, but once we went through our training, we continue to train annually, and never out of my 20 years did we ever train that way or to target and to do those things. And again, I've never faced it as far as racism, being a black man in Connersville, except for a few times when I was arresting a guy and he was drunk and he was just spouting off at the mouth, and I could have took it that way, but it was like, no, you're going to jail. And I never did target. There wasn't a lot of blacks in town anyway, but if I had to arrest one of my black brothers, they knew I was there, I was going to do it. But it was with the same respect. It wasn't that, oh, well, I'm doing it because you're black or this and that. And I've had to do it before. Yeah. But with that respect, and just like, and again, I just love to hear that we need to change it to the point of where it is help instead of just detention. Yeah. That's a good point, because that's something to look at. We got to implement those things to be able to do that, to get people, and not just blacks, but everybody that's incarcerated, acclimated back to society, to be there. So, that is a big thing. But, here recently, have I had to deal with, and I don't know if it's just because, I'm not actually a small fella, even though he called me Little Denny, and that's okay. But in my face, I never have. Has there been some stuff in the background? I'm sure. Yeah. But they've never come to me in my face, to be able to do that. Even with other law enforcement officers, if I was on a scene, I had never seen any deliberately treat any of the blacks any different. Yeah. So.
That's awesome. I'm encouraged by the positivity that everybody here has shared, because we obviously want to acknowledge that in our community as well. I wanted to speak to a little bit to just give some information and some tools if you're interested in incarceration statistics, if you're interested in the history a little bit behind. I wasn't taught any of that in school, and kind of learned that on my own through a personal experience. And Brian Stevenson, I think people are familiar with that name because of the movie Just Mercy, but the book is actually really good and worth reading if you're interested in that. And then the EJI.org, Equal Justice Initiative, they have an actual location that you can visit in Montgomery, Alabama. I've been there. I recommend it if you're in the area. And then also the National Memorial for Peace and Justice honors those who have been lynched. And also visited there, took my sons there. It's extremely emotional place, extremely sobering to think that happened to family members potentially. I know that my son, we walked around and the names are on, I don't even know what you call that, but they're just large pieces of metal. The names are engraved and dates, and one of my boys found their dad's name, and obviously it's not him, but it was really, really, it hit me in the face that it could have been. And I mean, my husband was born in Alabama in 1962, so things were going on that were pretty ugly there. And there's a lot of literature out that shares the idea that, you know, lynching was outlawed, but then it just kind of morphed itself into mass incarceration of black males. And those who were poor and had no access to representation were given harsh sentences. And there's also a book called The Sun Does Shine by Anthony Ray Hinton. He was innocent and on death row for over 30 years. And it's his story, and he writes, it's a quick read. I recommend it. It's very good. It's a little lighter than maybe the subject matter at times, but also extremely sad. And one thing he says in his book is 1 in 10 are innocent on death row, and that's a terrible statistic. So, you know, people are dying incarcerated just because they were not able to afford representation, and a couple of people say they saw this guy doing something and boom, he spends his life there. So that's a travesty that I don't personally care for in terms of our current history, and I hope that there are people working to make that better. I really want to appreciate Judge Freed for being here and being invested in all people of our community. Do you guys have anything to speak towards any of that? Anything else?
I mean, as far as lynching, I don't know of any of my family members or, you know, as pastor that have, you know, dealt with that. Personally, I have. It was my 8th grade year, and a family member received a phone call that I was going to be hung.
Wow.
And
I remember that. Your mom about passed out.
yeah, and that I was there were several things that tied to this. I was going to be hung, and I was going to be a black sacrifice or something. It was back in 8th grade. It was to the point that I was. This went on for several weeks. It was to the point that I was picked up and picked up each morning and picked up from school by the state police.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
You know, and this went on for about a month and a half, 2 months. I can't really recall. And that was my personal experience of it. You know,
Did you know who was behind that?
Yes, I did know who was behind
Really?
it. We found out.
You found out later?
Strangely, me and this individual are friends now.
No kidding.
And once again, that was through adults. You know, it was through adults, and his behavior was through his parents. And and today, me and that gentleman are friends. You know, for him, it was. He looks at it. It was just kids being kids. You know.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just. But you know, black people have to grow up fast because of these particular situations. You know what I'm saying? We're, you know, all black men, all black children, we are taught how to deal with the police when we were kids.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So, and it shouldn't have to be like that. You know, it shouldn't have to be like that. You know, I'm raised, you know, I have 2 biracial stepchildren right now that they're both in high school, and they're just starting to deal with it, some racism. You know, that, you know, like I said, most of it is on Facebooks and Instagrams and stuff, you know. And they don't understand it. They're starting to understand it, and you know, but they don't put up with it. They don't put up with it. Their mother and myself, we install them that you don't have to be treated like this to have friends, or if you think this is your friend, then you need to remove yourself from that. And they do that. They handle it very well. They handle themselves very well in these situations. You know, it's just, but, you know, just, I mean, growing up as a kid, Connersville was a culture shock for me. I come from Cincinnati. You know, my first day of school when I come to Connersville, I left an all-black school, and my first day of school here in Connersville was at Frazee Elementary, and we get to school, I get enrolled. My grandmother's walking me to my class with the principal, I do believe it was, I can't remember. And they opened the door, and I looked in, I seen 2 other black gentlemen. I immediately start to cry because I didn't deal with white people. I've never dealt with white people. And back then, you know, you can whip your kid's butt. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. And my grandma's like, you know, what are you crying about? What's wrong? I'm like, there's too many white people. So my grandma bust my butt. Get your butt in there and sit down and go to school. You know, it was a straight culture shock to me. Because I grew up in a black neighborhood. There was no white people around. There was nothing. And I never dealt with it until I came here. You know, when I came here, most of the time I came here from Cincinnati. It was during the summer, and we never left the hill. So we didn't see a lot of white people then. You know, Little Denny was, the reason I call him Little Denny is his father is Big Denny, I'm sorry. So, you know, it was one of the first people I met. And we played all summer, you know, it's just, racism, it's here. It's here to stay. It'll never go away, but we just need to deal with it. You know, we just need to deal with it. And what I mean by deal with it, it needs to be handled. And to deny it is not dealing with it.
Right.
You know, we have to, you know, like Wyndal says, white people need to get behind us.
Sure.
You know, and it won't go away until it's accepted that there is racism. You know, that there is racism.
I think you put it very well.
Mr. Freed, what do you think?
Oh, I agree. Any problem, even one of this magnitude, especially, any problem, the first step, this is what we say in addiction too.
Yeah.
You have to recognize the problem before you can fix it. So there's no question. Mr. Nicholson, absolutely correct. No doubt.
You have to recognize it, you know.
We have a graphic that kind of shows a little bit of the disproportionate numbers of people groups that are incarcerated. It's actually 2018. I did see today that incarcerations as a whole have gone down, which I think Judge Freed said he might speak some to that premise, but I think that it's an interesting statistic and a graphic there because I'm not really sure that people are really aware of the magnitude of just how we're not equally represented. I'm not really sure that people know that, so I thought it was worth sharing.
Yeah, you sent that out, and I didn't have the exact numbers memorized for every year, obviously, but I was aware of the general theme that a graph like this shows for this particular year, and you would have seen on there the general population statistics on the left, and then the prison population statistics percentages on the right. So you see that Black Americans make up 12% of the total population of the country, yet they make up 33% of the prison population. And in the notes, in the footnotes on the graph, it says they're counting prison population as those who are sentenced to longer than 1 year in prison. So you can see that then the next row, 63% of the general population is white in the country, and yet you see only 30% of the prison population is white. And then Hispanics lie somewhere in between in severity of this disparate issue, where 16% of the population of the country presently is Hispanic and 23% prison population. So the point is, in a truly colorblind society, one would hope that the two columns would be exactly equal. You see, that's the idea in a truly, a utopian colorblind society, that if black Americans made up 12% of the general population, that you'd see round about 12% of the people in jail would be black. But you don't. You see 33%. And the same thing on down through the row there. So this would be a boring chart in an absolutely, truly colorblind society, because both columns would have exactly matching numbers left to right. We don't see that. There's a lot of hypotheses. There's a lot of hypotheses about that. Obviously, the most upfront is what we're here today to talk about. Inherent racism in the judicial system, and I think I've made it clear so far in my discussion. There's no doubt about, to some extent, in some areas, at some time, that's clearly the case. Another factor. I remember a quote from, it was in a movie about Jimmy Hoffa. I don't know if it's a real quote or not, but I wish it was, because I think it really spoke a lot to an inherent truth. I think there was a scene in the movie where when Hoffa was the president of the Teamsters, he stops alongside the road because he sees a trucker with a flat tire. And to make a point, he's going to stop and help the man change the tire. And he's talking about how, we're using race to divide us up. And the real divisions in the country are between the rich and the poor. And if white men in the Union and black men in the Union understood that they have a lot more in common with one another than did a poor white person did with a rich white person. You have far less in common with that person than you do the guy that works the same job for the same pay you do, who happens to be black. And so I think really, and I don't have any research on this, although I am aware that there is a lot of research on this. I may start reading some of this now that I've come to, but I think poverty has something to do with these disparities here as well, not just skin color. Now, but you say, yes, but if you go another layer deeper than that, it is skin color that causes the poverty then causes the inherent difference. So really, it's still racist. Okay, I got you. But if you give black folks public school education that isn't as good as what you're giving white folks, and then you have a housing program in urban areas, this doesn't really apply so much around here, but in urban areas where you're going to put a whole bunch of people in a confined housing project where everyone is desperately poor, that puts everybody on edge, not just black people. Anybody who's desperately poor is going to be on edge. And you put them all together like that, they're going to fuss and fight, and there's going to be a lot of trouble. It's not going to be a pleasant place to live, as we've seen. We're starting to get away from that in this country, actually, those big high-rises, multi-thousand unit places, because they're no good for anybody, whether you're black or white or anybody else. Yeah. Isn't it reasonable to expect, if black America has an inferior public school education opportunity, an inferior housing available opportunity, and we could talk about redlining, the history of redlining, and people weren't allowed to live in certain areas. You can say, well, no, they can live anywhere they want. Well, sort of now they can, but historically, and we're not talking about ancient history.
Sort of now.
Sort of, yeah. In ancient history, it wasn't even sort of. It was like, no, you ain't moving it.
Exactly.
Right. A lot of people they did not have access to the same housing opportunity. All right. It is reasonable to assume then, those are factors: your education, attainment, and where you're going to live. That means who your friends are going to be. That means who your contacts are going to be. This is how you make it up in the business world. It's your friends, that give you the hook for a job here and there. You didn't make those friends because you weren't living in the right neighborhood.
Exactly.
And so I think it's entirely predictable. That you could change the color of the skin on row 1 of this chart from black to white. If I told you that white folks consistently had worse public education and consistently had worse housing opportunities the last 2 or 3 generations, and I would expect that we would have a disproportionate amount of incarceration because desperation leads to incarceration.
It leads to incarceration.
Okay?
We ain't so
So
fair 'cause we wanted
I
to.
really think, yes, of course, you have inherent racism.
Yeah.
But we need to look another layer deeper at root causes,
Yeah.
which it principally, the biggest one is educational
Yeah.
opportunity. That's it. So I'm gonna leave it there.
I know the statistics for Baltimore, I don't think a single black boy in elementary school could pass
Child.
the tests. That's terrible. We actually had a question come in from Mr. Darrell, and he wants to know, is Connorsville an ideal place to raise a family? A black family. Forgive me, a black
I was
family.
gonna say it's black family. I couldn't think of any better place to raise any child in Connorsville. Like I said, as when we came up, we were raised. You know, it says we were taught it takes a village, and we lived in a village.
Mm-hmm.
You know, speaking on what Mr. Freed says, you know, black people generally live. Our neighborhoods are called projects. And what my grandma always said, what's the explanation of a project? Experiment. So let's put a whole bunch of low-income people together in one area, call it a project, and see what happens. You know, and this is what you get. But as far as raising a black family in Cartersville, like I said, I couldn't think of any better place. You know, it's just I don't have any argument with it.
What do you think?
Me personally, from being here, I would say, like Eric, no. But if to move mine in, no, I wouldn't, because me as being a father, you know, I missed out on a couple opportunities with my children that are older. You know, I'm not as clear-headed. I just had a lot of wrong going on. But the children I got now, I care about them tremendously. So everything I do is their opportunities. And I just didn't want to see the opportunities for the same kids, for the white kids as the black kids in this town, for me to move mine here. Because I know some very smart kids that's not going to get the same opportunity as a white kid because of who their parents and bloodline follow behind. Now, if they had a system here or some kind of roots here, maybe they could come and gel in. But to move here and say this is going to be good for my black, I wouldn't. That's just me. I wouldn't.
You want to speak to that, Dennis?
Yeah, me, I would. Again, growing up here and seeing the opportunities that are yet to come, I'm looking ahead, and I definitely understand what Wyndal was saying, and but being able to see and understand some of the opportunities that are here, I could see where that can be, you know, that way. But as far as safety-wise and looking at the demographics and the things that are going on here versus some of the other areas, I'm gonna be right here in Connorsville. So,
I echo those sentiments. We've raised our boys on Grand Avenue, and the only other black resident is actually Dennis's auntie, Miss Bash, and she's lovely, a family member to us, honestly, at this point. But there's not a thing that my neighbors wouldn't do for my kids. And if I move anywhere else with black boys, I have not guaranteed that anywhere. And all of us, my husband, myself, even my kids, we treasure our neighbors, and we have chosen that. Like, we've chosen to come in relationship with them and chosen to be outside, and it speaks volumes. And my kids play basketball out of, you know, in Indianapolis and all over, and people have always said, why do you live there? That's what black friends of ours in the basketball world have said to us, why in the world would you live there? And I said, I cannot give you a long enough list, because I can live in your fancy neighborhood and not know my neighbors, and they don't give two craps about my children, and I wouldn't trade what I have on Grand Avenue for any neighborhood anywhere. And
Can I
very, very
rebuttal on what I was
appreciative.
saying? I don't want to, because I don't want to get home and they going to floor me. You did Cartersville like that? Oh my God, you did it like that. You know what I mean? So let me verify what
I
I'm
heard
trying to
what
say.
you said.
I love Cartersville through and through. I will come home. This is going to be home it's still home. But I was just saying, from an aspect of somebody else looking in and
Yeah.
looking at the programs, the system started for the black kids. You know what I mean? And I think that's coming into play. I really think it is coming. But if I had to speak on it tomorrow,
Right.
no, because I want my children to have more than me. I go, man, the white people in this town have treated me just as good as the black. I moved from the Hill. All black people. My mom moved us to 21st of Virginia. You know what I mean? All the other black people was behind us on Ohio, and they didn't like the ones up on the hill. So that was two different worlds. But when I went to Maplewood, there was two other black people there. Me and Chad Bellikai, and Steve was a sixth grader, so we was going to lose him. So it's just me, him. And them kids, I got called the name one time, and after I showed myself that wasn't going to go down, they embraced me, they loved me, they still to this day accept me, you know, so Connersville is that. I just think some of the old heads need to go on and sit back and let things change around here. Give everybody an opportunity, not just because because it don't work out for them. They want their son to do something. He ends up being a drug addict. He ends up being a thief. He is, you know what I mean? Because they wanted to keep going instead of just giving the opportunity.
I think to give credibility to what you said originally, which you're worried about, I think what you're saying is you already have roots there for them. And
Right.
it would be difficult
Right.
when you don't have friends from day one to move into a community
What kind of
that's
little spots are for black people?
Sure,
Barbershops.
sure, and I hear you.
Where you gonna get the black kids' haircut at? Or Glenn, I understand Glenn, but you still gotta have a route to Glenn because you just can't pick up the yellow pages.
No,
and
I
find
totally
Glenn,
think that's totally a respectable
That's
point.
all
Yeah.
I'm saying.
I had no problems growing up here. I mean, today, so many people from the inner cities of Indianapolis, Cincinnati, and it takes one visit for them to come here to fall in love. You know, I can go to Cincinnati, I can go to Indianapolis, I can go to other cities, and people go, where you from? Cartersville, Indiana. Where is that? Oh, that's a little small town. Or if they heard of it, you meet somebody, and if they have heard of Cartersville, and you tell them you're from Cartersville. I didn't know there was black people there. You hear that a lot, you know. But I mean, there are so many. You know, you had a gentleman on this panel a few weeks ago, Mac Sean. We call him Mac Sean, but Sean Parks is come from Gary, Indiana, and has fell in love with Cartersville. And and there's so many other people who are black people who have come here and fell in love with it, because you don't have to look over you're not looking over your shoulder. Mm-hmm. You're not worried about walking out your door and have to fight. You're not worried about police following you down the road unless you are doing something. But as far as raising, I have no problems with. I wish more black people would come here. Maybe some of you guys don't, but I wish more black people would come to Cartersville, Indiana. It is a great place. It's a great place to raise white people or white children and a white family or black family, Hispanic, whatever. It's not as diverse, but it is a diverse community as far as people get along. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? This is one place that you know your neighbor.
Yeah.
You know your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We make it work.
We make it work. You know what I'm saying?
You come into community. Mm-hmm. And that's really the whole point of hosting this program, and our hope is that we do come into greater community, that we come into relationships with one another that are wonderful and last many years that we'll be better for. I want to thank you for tuning in to this program tonight as well as the previous ones, and we wish you a good evening.